All right. Hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Sunday, November 3rd, 2024. This is your afternoon update on what is now Potential Tropical Cyclone 18. We're starting off here on Tropical Tidbits, looking at the satellite presentation of newly formed PTC 18 from the National Hurricane Center. System getting organized here this afternoon in the southern central Caribbean Sea, a little bit southeast of Jamaica. System is not particularly well organized yet. We still have some issues with the thunderstorms and the center of rotation just now starting to close off. So the Hurricane Center is not named as TD18 and or TS Rafael as of yet, but it probably will by tonight or tomorrow. We'll look at the satellite presentation and all that, and then we'll come to the first cone, which is shown below here from the NHC. Again, 4 p.m. first advisory. Remember, our times are an hour behind now. Instead of 5 and 11 a.m. p.m., we're now at 4 and 10 a.m. p.m. Eastern because of the time change. This is PTC 18's first cone. We have a tropical storm watch up for Jamaica, or tropical storm warning, rather, for Jamaica, and a hurricane watch up for the Cayman Islands. Our system is expected to move northward for the next day or so and then begin to drift back off to the northwest. A now brush is forecast with Jamaica, and this has already been a pretty good westward adjustment from what we were seeing earlier yesterday, where we thought this may come directly over Jamaica and then spend some significant time over Cuba, then maybe come close to the Florida Keys. The center line of that cone, though, is starting to shift away as the storm organizes. Very common, so we talk about these storms that are just now organizing. We always say, hey, don't look too much at the early models, because the most adjustment you're going to see is in these first couple of days when the storm is still forming. So it is expected to brush close enough for Jamaica for direct impacts, and then it's potentially going to move over the Cayman Islands as a hurricane. It has it stamped as a tropical storm, but there is some uncertainty going into Monday, Tuesday about how fast this can intensify over some pretty warm water and in some pretty good conditions over the Caribbean. But it is expected to become a hurricane and move over the western tip of Cuba, where, again, by Wednesday afternoon, we see this moving into the Gulf of Mexico. Then the forecast kind of diverges from there. So let's go over a few things and talk about what's going on. So this is the latest satellite presentation. Hurricane hunters were out there earlier today. They did find some low-level center of circulation. We can see a nice mid-level circulation starting to come in here with some good thunderstorm activity starting to rotate in, but the low-level center is a little bit displaced from that. Looking at the aircraft recon data, you can see they found a few centers of circulation here and then kind of like up to the north of that where there's some indication that there was a closed low, but it was a little bit displaced in that mid-level rotation center where some of these heavier cloud tops are. So it looks like, your mid-level rotation centers here, your low-level may be more like here. So it's probably going to take some time for this to wrap up underneath that canopy of clouds and condense and kind of really organize a little bit further. That's why the Hurricane Center is kind of holding off on it just now. Some dry air then also on the east side of the storm, a couple rope clouds down to the south, all indicating that we have a pretty common setup for a storm that's getting itself together, but really hasn't fully yet. Water vapor imagery, looking at the next day or so for this one, looks pretty good. We have an upper low backing away from Cuba and a little upper trough that's starting to retrograde away from the area. And what we have in the upper levels is a upper level anticyclone building. You can see a nice outflow channel leaving Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. That's mass and that's air moving away from the storm. So that's kind of helping it to exhaust and breathe a little bit. And it's got this nice moist inflow from the East Pacific. So it looks like it's got a nice environment beginning. And this water is very warm this time of year, and it will be tracking over a lot of that. And given that more limited land interaction now, it's going to stay over that warm water longer. So with that upper high building, the upper low, retrograding, and at some point that'll start actually helping the storm a little bit itself. All those things combine for what looks like a storm that has a nice window to intensify up until a landfall with Cuba. From there, it's going to get a little bit more interesting because one thing that's going to be standing in the storm's way is a big trough over the western central U.S. And this is where things get a little more interesting. So as we've seen today, that westward adjustment now means the storm is probably going to graze the western tip of Cuba and move more into the central Gulf of Mexico. I think that the situations where this kind of like hugs the Florida coastline and comes into the Big Bend are probably going away. The high pressure looks strong enough to force this a little bit further west. The general motion will be because of this big high offshore of the eastern U.S. That's going to force this kind of away from Florida and more towards the Gulf of Mexico. But well off to the west here, there's going to be a big trough that we'll show you in a second that's kind of slowly moving in from the west. So our storm is going to hit what we think is going to be a pretty heavy amount of wind shear. And if you see here on the GFS, notice how the storm moves into the Gulf and looks still pretty healthy, but then all of a sudden it starts slowing down and it starts falling apart going into Thursday and Friday and almost completely dissipates before landfall. And this is something that all of the global models show the GFS, the Euro, the Icon, the CMC, all of them are showing this. Now, the outlier right now in our forecast is the hurricane models. They are way up. I can't show you to them at the moment on Tropical Tidbits. The site's reloading because of the new storm name change, so I don't have them handy. But earlier, HWRF and HFAST were all very, very aggressive with this, even into the Gulf of Mexico. So someone's going to be wrong here, but I think that those models are probably going to trend down. But basically, what happens is as the storm moves through, we can see it here on Tuesday, Monday night into Tuesday. We see it move towards Cuba, probably a hurricane. We have bigger high over the eastern U.S. This is moving just along the backside of that ridge. But look at off to the west here, big old trough, and I'll show you this in a little bit better detail. Zooming out a little bit, this is the upper trough, upper low that's going to be moving across. And what this is going to impart is what we call a deep layer shear. This is a large, through the atmosphere, instead of the shear being at one or two levels of the atmosphere, it's going to be at almost every level of the atmosphere. There's going to be strong southwest and northeast winds all through these lines here. And what that's going to do is push a lot of wind across the storm, and it should help tear it apart and weaken it some as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. So this trough is not going to move a whole lot. We back up a little bit. We go into Tuesday, we go into Wednesday, Thursday, and even into Friday. You see this, it doesn't really move a whole lot. It kind of sits near the four corners in the Western Plains. And if we go back to the GFS wind shear map, you can kind of see how this plays out here. So if we look at the storm on Tuesday morning, it's got that nice anticyclone aloft. It's got great outflow. It's got very low wind shear. It's actually, in a nice environment. Notice how the ridge goes up over it. So it's got this nice little window down here where it's kind of off on its own little thing. But as you go into Thursday, Friday, watch what happens. It starts getting into this heavy wind shear. And look at this. This is just straight just wind shear, just deep layer, strong shear through the atmosphere. So we have it stamped 989 right here. But then as you go into Thursday into Friday, 992, 998, that number going up is the pressure rising, which means the storm's weakening. And as you get into Friday afternoon and even into Saturday, it basically all but disappears. It's kind of lagging a little bit, but you can see here the storm 998, and then it just kind of falls apart. So the expectation is that the Gulf of Mexico will not be as welcoming as the Caribbean is. So it is still a threat to the Gulf Coast, and it very well can be a hurricane moving into the Gulf, but then the chances of this staying together as it gets closer to land look low right now. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Going over to Tomer Berg's website, you can see the westward trend. Black is the current runs. The outlying runs from earlier today, showing that westward correction. And ship's guidance does show some potential for rapid intensification, about 15 to 25% roughly, a little bit higher over the next couple of days. But even notice how the ship shows that wind shear lowering, and then the wind shear steadily increases until the end of the forecast period. And the wind shear is almost 50 knots on the ships. Now, what are some potential outlying scenarios? Well, the ECMWF and the GFS ensembles kind of show a potential where this could see a little bit stronger. The Euro shows this actually dipping more off to the west and then coming in once that shear kind of relaxes. Eventually this low does move out. So if we cut back over the GFS, you can see eventually Friday into Saturday, this low starts to depart, right? And it's going to start moving pretty quick when it does. So as it moves away, Saturday into Sunday, if our storm, instead of going into the wind shear and dying, if the high is a little stronger and it drifts off to the west, it could find a window where that shear is less and then make a recurve as that low moves out. That energy would probably pull it off with it. So, we could still be looking at a potential for a hurricane or a strong tropical storm somewhere along that upper Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, maybe Western Florida Panhandle. GFS doesn't really show that. It shows a more straight shot into the Gulf, hitting that wind shear and then almost uniformly weakening quite a bit as it approaches. So those are the two kind of outlying scenarios. I think this looks a lot better for the Florida Peninsula, although this will bring you some rain. And then for everybody else, it's just going to kind of be a wait and see. We had a couple days to watch this, and I think we're going to have to see how the Gulf is shaping up and the trends for this big low as it moves up. But it's something we're going to watch all week. So that's what I got for you guys today overall. Again, no reason to worry as of right now. This very well could wind up falling apart and not be a big deal. Could just be a rainmaker. It would be very beneficial rain for the southeast U.S. if that were the case. But there are some worlds where this could still be a stronger hit, and we still need to respect it and watch it as such. So that's what I got for you guys today. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.